Hey everyone, welcome to tonight's Sentinel Circle discussion, interview, group meeting, seance, whatever you want to call it. Tonight we're talking about more spy stuff. You know, the month of October is the month of spooks. I've got my ghost over my shoulder and jackal lantern up there. So we're nearing the end of the month. We're coming up on a Halloween next week. So we're going to be prepared. By the way, don't miss our next week's show right before Halloween on spy culture. We're going to be having my friend, Dr. Chris Moran, who wrote a great book called Company Confessions. We'll be talking about CIA stuff. It's spooky stuff. That's why I have the ghost. And then my friend, Mike McCormick, speaking of spooky and evil, well, not Mike. Mike's not spooky or evil, but insurmountable evil. We're going to be talking about some interesting things like movies about CIA. Woo, scary. But without further ado, I'm going to introduce tonight's guest. We're going to be talking about spy stuff, but real spy stuff. We're going to be talking about M.I.C.E., the four doors of betrayal, money, ideology, coercion, and ego. And we're joined by Dr. James Lockhart from the University of Texas, El Paso. So good evening, Dr. Lockhart, and welcome to the Sentinel Circle discussion of M.I.C.E. So thanks for being here.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me here. I'm pleased to be here.
So full disclosure, I'm friends with Dr. Chris Moran. He's friends with Dr. Chris Moran. So it's kind of the point of where we're starting from. But spy stuff is spy stuff. Some say it's the second oldest profession, probably. And there are tools, techniques, procedures, and technology which are involved. But despite all the glitz and glimmer and all this spy stuff, and we'll be talking about all the kind of spy stuff in the movies next week. This week we're going to talk about real spy stuff. So obviously, I've been on both sides of this issue. As I mentioned, I've done counterintelligence and military case officer stuff, offensive counterintelligence, and just espionage. But talk a little bit about your background, Dr. Lockhart, and tell us kind of how you got to the point of where you're an expert on mice. And we're not talking about the squeaky kind.
Great. First of all, I'm writing a book right now on Lieutenant General Vernon Walters, who was DDCI, and he once gave a speech joking. It's actually a pretty good point that intelligence is probably actually the oldest profession because the one selling the services had to have information on about the market, and the one paying for those services had to have information on where to go to get it. So
well said.
Intelligence came before the so-called profession. Well, I'm a historian. I specialize in history and international affairs. I like to think in terms of big picture, global, and comparative trends. I specialize in the history of American foreign relations and intelligence. I have area expertise in Latin America, Africa, the Middle East, basically the area that we call the Global South. It used to be called the Third World. It's the same place. As someone who got deep into U.S.-Latin American relations, I gained some insight into, or a feeling, a perception really, that I can make an intervention in the field, a difference in the field, and that it struck me that a lot of the people who were specialists in Latin America they were weak on actually understanding how the U.S. government worked, and they were weak in understanding how intelligence works. And people who study American government and American foreign relations and intelligence could do a lot better with the area expertise, especially with foreign language capabilities. So I try to bring all of this together. How did I get into M.I.C.E. and teaching counterintelligence? I have for several years taught in interdisciplinary programs in international affairs, defense and security, and now in security and intelligence, which go beyond, academic courses in history. We teach people who are getting jobs in the military, in the intelligence profession, in the Department of State, various places, and we teach them the practical. The field of intelligence studies it's got academics, it's got historians, it's also got practitioners. So it's a nice mix of academic and practicalities. And through all of this, I came to be one of the things that I specialize in is in espionage, and counterintelligence. And so I got into this rather deeply. It's been several years now, and I teach this to undergraduates and graduates.
So I hope I don't throw you off by this next question, but as a practicing spy, I think. No, I'm retired. Sorry, forget I said that. As someone who used to be a spy, is retired now. The practical approach, I think, is very much the thing that people should focus on, because we'll talk next week about spy fiction and kind of how both sides feed each other regarding fact and fiction. They go back and forth. Some things inspire reality. Reality inspires fiction. It's really interesting how that works. But for the practical side, there's a book I read years ago. I'm not sure if you read it, that really did a good job of explaining a lot of the stuff that goes on within the espionage, countering-espionage community. It's called Widows. Did you ever see that book? It's about double agent operations that went bad, and it was probably published in the late 1980s, if I recall. Have you seen that or not?
No, it sounds fascinating, and I will probably text you and put that on my list. Double Agents
Yeah, here it is.
Gone Bad sounds really great. No, I'm not familiar with that book.
Yeah, it's William Corson, Widows, and it's about 4 American spies and their widows. And basically, it's about double agent operations that gone wrong. I highly recommend it, because at the time I was reading it, I was actually at the Army's Foreign Counterintelligence Activity up at Fort Meade doing case reviews of operations that went wrong. Just say it. And one of the great ironies is that a lot of the time people hear more about our failures than our successes, because if we're successful, we can't talk about it, because it's some of the operations I ran are still ongoing. So it's one of those things like, yeah, you can't talk about it because it's super cool, but literally I'd have to kill you. No, just joking. It's a joke. But back to the serious premise here. So let's get right into it then. So M.I.C.E, money, ideology, coercion, and ego. I can tell you for a fact, as a practitioner, I've used all of these in the field in some form. So, I think obviously the judgment of which will work best is greatly determined by one's assessment of the target. And the target can be an organization, an individual, a faction. There's a number of things that go into thinking, but let's just talk about the framing of M.I.C.E. What do you think? Did you think M.I.C.E. is a good framing for how we examine espionage and spying? Is that a good framework to use as we describe it today?
I think M.I.C.E, I know it as money, ideology, compromise, and ego. So it's sometimes compromise, sometimes coercion. It's basically the same thing, gaining leverage and forcing someone into it. I think it's an excellent shorthand for getting into the motivations of why people betray from the one hand, or why people are subject to, why, if you're looking to recruit people to be your spy, why they might be vulnerable to that. I think it's based on, a practical, it's coming from the ground up, right? It's people looking at all the cases that have happened and coming up with an acronym that seems to explain most of them. And so as a teaching and as a training device, it is excellent. And as the beginnings of an analysis of espionage or counterintelligence, it's also very, very good. But I would caution people not to see this as the final word, or not to see this as the ultimate authority. It's really a beginning point to start to think about all this and to put things together and make them make sense with a concept. When we're talking about human motivations, it is very complex. It is more complex than any acronym or any theory can account for. And we will, and when I teach it, I really emphasize that people's motives change over time as they're spying. And sometimes they're a little confusing. And someone's case, and I have a list of a few here, it's not really entirely clear exactly where they would fit into it, because there are some peculiarities. And so when we're dealing with the motives of people to act in the broad, scope of humanity, this is an excellent starting point, but there's more to know than what happens here. And if you focus only on M.I.C.E. and think that that's all there is, then you're going to be vulnerable to being hit by the unexpected when it occurs, because there's more out there in explaining.
Yeah, so I agree. I think that obviously the assets I've run, you always start off with money in most operations. Just saying, I think that's a common kind of hook we're taught at the spy school, and I tend to believe it's true, although money doesn't always work. Once you establish that relationship using money as a tool, because most of these guys are not going to get rich off the money you pay them. Just saying, it's not like some people do, but most of the time, no. It's just a control measure that you put in place to keep control. And the other thing to remember, and I think this is important for people to recognize, if you are asking someone to spy, it's a seduction. We talk about in spy school walking the developmental. That's the term for someone you're developing to recruit. You walk them down the primrose path until you pitch them. And that pitch is a lot like a seduction, because you've got to figure out the motivation. You got to figure out adequate and timely responses to concerns. You got to have thought through how to go about trying to make sure that person, once they say yes, is protected. And then sometimes there's what we call buyer's remorse. Like the asset will say, "Oh, I really don't want to be recruited," and they try to get out of it. So these are all the things that go into it. To your point, one size does not fit all. That's why they call it tradecraft. It's a trade.
Yeah.
You cannot push a button and think, "Oh, I'm just going to use money here." It's like, no, it doesn't work that way. And some of the operations which started out with money, I know for a fact, have gone into ideology eventually. Some of them, and I can't say the operations, but a lot of them have. So let's just, at a 101 level, let's go through the M.I.C.E. elements: money, ideology, coercion, and ego. Let's start with money. So, as I mentioned, as a practicing case officer, we always start by trying to get someone to take money. Even if they don't need it, you get them to take money. So why is that? Why do you think that is? We have to use money as the hook to get into it.
And you're definitely approaching this from the American thinking, and especially from the CIA. They want a paid, controlled relationship with the asset. It makes them feel like it's real and it's secure. And until they have that, it may feel unstable from the point of view of headquarters in the.
Well, keep in mind, I've not always run operations that require money, but I know what you're saying, and I agree. That's the way we're taught. We are taught that way. Go ahead.
Yeah, and that's definitely an American way of going about it. But if you look at other intelligence services like the Cubans, the DGI, and I'm writing on them right now, almost all of their assets were ideologically motivated, and they took very little money. Some of them, no money at all. And even a few of them, just a one-on-one meeting with Fidel Castro would keep them going for a lifetime spying. They were very motivated by the cause. And the Cubans didn't have that much money to pay their spies.
But they were super duper effective in Southern Florida. I had to deal with them back in the day. So absolutely. They were amazing.
Yeah, that would have been, you would have seen a lot of them out there.
Late 80s. They were mixed in with all the drug stuff. Yeah, they were very effective.
Right. And they had a lot going on coming from Panama as a staging area and relations with Noriega and some of the cartels in Colombia.
I can tell you stories literally about this. Yeah, it was an interesting time. So keep going. Sorry.
But money there is something to that. Money is something that even people who aren't motivated by money, they need it for one reason or another. They may not necessarily be greedy. They may have gotten into debt. They may have gambling problems. They may have health problems. Some of the people on the U.S. side who sought money, like Alder Games, who made $2 million from the KGB and its successor from Russia. He'd been involved in a costly divorce, and he had a new wife, and she had expensive tastes, and so did he. Right, he wanted his Jaguar. There's that. There's another case. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Harold James Nicholson. Also from the CIA, and he had been involved in a divorce, which had cost him money, and he had custody of his children, and he had practical problems with that. The government salary wasn't quite meeting his needs, and so he sought money. And then you have others who are just using it as a business. They're trying to, like Larry Wu Tai Chen, who worked for the Foreign Broadcast Information Service as a Chinese English translator, all the way from the 40s up to the 80s when he got caught. And he wasn't really giving information that was that great to the Chinese. It was mostly open source stuff, but he was pitching it as, as if it were the best of the best. And that was just a second job for him to make more money so he could buy real estate, things of that nature. So money definitely moves a lot of people. They're not necessarily doing it because they're greedy, but they're just trying to make a living, or they're trying to make ends meet. Maybe they have problems. Maybe they have all kinds of problems related with our relationship with money in life.
Yeah, speaking of that, so the bad guy character in the last line is based on the Nicholson caper.
Okay.
Just saying. So we based that on I'm not going to tell you the plot, so you have to read the book. Anyway, but
is his nickname Batman also? Because Nicholson's nickname was Batman for.
We didn't go that far. We didn't want to get sued.
Oh, okay. All right.
Anyway, but
I like that though. Nicholson was, he was a great case officer. He had a really good reputation, and he was called Batman because he was going out at all hours of the night, very dedicated, servicing assets, dead drops, and.
Well, I use a lot of people I knew at CI as kind of the archetypes of the. Anyway, we'll get into that some of the time. But the money thing is important, I think, for people to recognize that it's kind of a gateway drug. But to your point now, and one of the things we used to do is we had assets who were concerned about their kids. They wanted their kids to go to college. So it's like, okay, we're going to set aside a certain amount of money for you to make sure you can put your kids through college, or we'll give you the cash and we'll help you spend it here under the radar. But the unexplained influence is something we're taught to look for in our own people. It's like, how did you get that Jaguar? How did you get that on a GS12 salary? It's like, okay, that's a bit alerting, but that's something that people do look at.
James Olson, in his book, The Art of Counterintelligence, I think it's called The Art of Counterintelligence is his subtitle. I think it's called Spy Catcher, or To Catch a Spy. That's it, To Catch a Spy. He was doing counterintelligence at CIA at the time, or he was in SE division. I'm not sure exactly which, but he wanted to have his people go out into the parking lot at Langley and take a note of any luxury car and then run the license plates and see if there was anything there. But I think it was either the Office of Security or the executive director who nixed it and said, you're casting aspersions onto people. You're ruining people's careers. There's no basis for doing this, and you just can't do it. But if he'd been allowed to do that, he would have seen Ames's Jaguar a couple of years early anyway, and they might have sped up that investigation even faster.
That's interesting because, I'm friends with Jim Woolsey. Jim Woolsey and I are friends, and he talks a little bit about this. We've talked about it because we've actually had to be in. And a few years ago, when Mike Pompeo was director, I can tell you that Woolsey brought up some of the Aldrich Ames issues because he learned from the Aldrich Ames fiasco quite a bit because of his being, director of CI and everything. So it was interesting to hear from that on the inside of what he saw.
We've all learned a lot from that case. There are many things to learn from that case. Still,
we could probably just do a whole show on just that case, but today we don't have time for that. We should probably come back because I want to expand the spy stuff past this month. We've been doing kind of a show per week, capturing certain elements of it. Like last week was tradecraft and spy stuff, and we were doing some. We've been trying to do it all on spooky stuff, but this is something that we could do a deeper dive in. So let's go into ideology because, technically speaking, as you mentioned, the GDI, the Cuban service, was very much into using ideology as a method of keeping people. By the way, other especially. I think during the Cold War, the Warsaw Pact nations seemed to use ideology, at least on their side, to motivate people. Not so much with us. They still had to use money with Americans, but ideology seemed to be a big driver in a lot of this. Is that correct?
I think for a lot of people who spied in the Cold War for the communist side, ideology was a motive. But this tended to decline after Stalin. So when you have these years when the Soviet Union is kind of on the cutting edge and they seem very avant-garde and they seem very idealistic, from the 20s into the 30s, a lot of people, in the U.S. it was Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, right? Totally motivated by ideology. and others of their generation. But after Stalin and the purges and the interventions in Yugoslavia and Czechoslovakia, the what do you call it? The rose-colored glasses fell off, and they stopped looking at the Soviets as an ideological attraction, and it became more about paying their assets money over time, or using coercion, blackmail.
Well, we're going to get to the coercion next, because that's going to be leads directly into this. But on the idea of the whole idea that you can use ideology as a tool is very effective by the fact that, to your point, it was an idealistic view of the Soviet Union. The People's Party and all this other stuff, Lenin and all that stuff. Utopia.
They promised utopia. In the 1920s, a lot of people followed them on that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because a little bit of this comes up in the movie Oppenheimer. I'm a big fan of that movie. I think it's a great movie. It's pretty accurate from all accounts, too. And I've talked to a number of folks. And that whole idea of this swan song and by the way, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, you just mentioned, were motivated, believing somehow that we were supposed to do that. Plus, there was discussions, as you probably know, that there was talk about sharing the technology with the Soviets because, hey, we're all friends, we're all allies here. Let's just give it to them. And that was because of this deep embedded group of fellow travelers. Can I say that? I guess I can say that. Who were kind of inside the Roosevelt government, that were just all kind of pro-Soviet. So it did clearly do that. But then it leads us to our next category, which is coercion, because one of the things that did happen during the Cold War, Doctor, is that they would, if you had family members inside of the Iron Curtain, they would threaten those individuals. Isn't that correct? As kind of hostages.
Oh yeah, that's. So you get that a lot now with China, with Chinese intelligence, motivating a lot of people in the diaspora, people in the U.S., people in the U.K. and elsewhere, in areas that the Chinese intelligence services are targeting,
right.
And they've got family and friends at home. They're not necessarily threatening them, but there's an awesome movie, if we can talk about fiction for a moment.
Sure.
Called Body of Lies with Leo DiCaprio. I don't know if you ever saw it.
I know that movie.
It's really nice. And the guy who plays the chief of Jordanian intelligence gets one of the members of Al-Qaeda, a low-level guy, but he's placed within the organization, and takes him out into the middle of the desert and just scares the hell out of him, takes the bag off of his face, and tells him, I want you to know that I found your mother. I've got your mother, and you want to call her because we've just put her up in a very nice apartment. She's getting the doctors that she needs. And I know you know, he didn't even have to say it, but he's saying, you cooperate with us and your mother's going to be fine. You don't cooperate with us, things are going to go in a different way. And he didn't even have to say these things out loud. It was just totally understood. And then he owned that asset inside of Al-Qaeda. That's in a movie, but that is a very nice illustration of how coercion with family can work.
Yeah, and we do use it. I mean, there's been some reported uses of that during the post 9/11 effort. I can talk a little bit about that. I never believed in torture. I was never in copper green, just saying. But I know people who did that stuff, and I don't think it got them what they wanted. But we could talk about that another day.
We used it to great effect with Aldrich Ames. So after he was arrested, and his wife was going to be arrested as well, and she was arrested, and they had a very young son. And the message given to Ames was, you can confess and cooperate and tell us everything, and we'll go very easy on your wife so she can leave the country and take your son and raise him in Colombia. Or we can prosecute both of you, and you'll both go to prison, and your son will go into foster care, and you'll never see him again. And that's coercion, and it works.
Well, we did it in Darkheart, so you probably haven't read it, but if you read the chapter on our interrogation of an enabler in Iran, he was the IRGC, and basically he was a U.S. citizen, and we basically used coercion on him, saying, look, you don't cooperate, we're going to send you to Gitmo, which is true. we were prepared to do it. By the way, this was early in Afghanistan, so we had very few rules of engagement. And the answer is, if the guy's listening, yes, we were going to send you to Gitmo. Just saying, it's like we weren't bluffing, but he cooperated. So just saying. So it was good news for him. He got to go home. But coercion does work. It's an effective tool. I'm not going to say I didn't use it because I have.
Sometimes the coercion can sneak up on you. You can fall into it by accident. So the case of one of my favorite cases to present on this is Sergeant Clayton Longtree, the Marine Corps security guard. He was at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow, 84 to 86. And somewhere in 85, late 85, fall 85, he met a beautiful Soviet woman who was employed as a typist in the embassy or an administrative assistant or something. And, of course, she smiled at him, and they struck up a relationship. I always tell students, especially in the military, look, if the most beautiful woman in the world is staring at you from across the room and winking her eye, it's too good to be true. You should, it doesn't happen that way in real life. Anyway, he got into a relationship with her, and a few weeks into it, she introduced him to her uncle, Uncle Sasha.
Oh yeah, I know it works.
And Uncle Sasha really, really loves America. He would love to get into the U.S. Embassy at night and just look around because he just loves your country. And Lone says, well, those are against the rules. I'm not allowed to do that. And then she says, don't you love me? I thought you loved me. And he says, oh, okay, sure. And so then they got him. And how did they get him? Because they had evidence that he let them in the first night. And then they could just tell him, look, we've got evidence. You're going to get in trouble if your superiors find out about this. So you keep cooperating with us and we'll take care of you.
Yeah.
And it works that way too.
Well, that brings it to the next one we want to talk about is ego, because obviously initially it was his ego that they played on. It's like, oh, I'm a hot guy. That's a hot chick. That's for me.
Yeah.
And then of course, hey, you've got this great access. We love you. You got to help get us in. And that also works on assets when I'm recruiting them, and that's part of the pitch I've actually done with assets. And this is one of those great ironies. I mean, I met these people in Alias. I always wonder, are they watching me now? Anyway, one of the assets I did say, look, I'm a representative of the U.S. government. We believe that you have access that will allow us to understand better what's going on in your country. You are the key to our understanding of your nation. Now, that's true. I mean, partly.
Yeah.
I mean, are there others? Yeah, I mean, we always got others we're developing, but the ego up thing is very important, right, Doctor?
Yeah. I think it's, a lot of people want to be told that they're important, that they're playing an important role. All of us, everybody, we all work for more reasons than money. We want our life to have importance and impact. And so,
yeah.
It's pretty easy if you see that somebody has really got that going on, you can play off of that and recruit them. But ego has another aspect as well. I had a colleague, she was ex-FBI, and she wanted to change M.I.C.E to M.I.C.E to add an R to that. And others I've heard want to use that R as well for revenge or retribution. I think that's already covered in ego. But the case for that is Edward Lee Howard. The CIA's Edward Lee Howard. It's the primary case for ego. So he was, are you familiar with that case?
Not really. No, tell us about it, please. No, please.
Very, very intelligent, very skilled. He went through the CIA's training, top in his class. His counter surveillance, the surveillance detection route capabilities were peerless. He was in the pipeline to go to Moscow Station, and all was well. And he went through routine polygraphs before going to Moscow, and they discovered what he had covered up in his first background checks, drug abuse, alcoholism. They even found an incident of petty theft where he had sat next to a woman with a baby on a flight once, and her baby cried for 40 minutes, and he thought she had cost him, she owed him. So when she went to go to the bathroom, he took $40 out of her purse. And so they got him for petty theft.
That's weird.
And they fired him. They fired him and said, look, you're not, because he had lied and said that he'd experimented with drugs in his past and it was over with. And their new polygraph was coupled with toxicology reports. And they're like, you're high right now, and they fired him. What the CIA learned from this was it was a mistake to fire him the way that they did. They basically said, sign this, that you're quitting, and there's the door, get out. And he left very angry, very angry.
Yeah.
The problem is for a year before that, he had been briefed in and read in on everything in Moscow, the technical surveillance stuff, all of the agents, everything. And in anger, for revenge, to satisfy his ego, he contacted the Soviets as a walk-in, and he burned people and he burned technical assets. And another Soviet defector came over named Yurchenko, Colonel Yurchenko, a year into that, and said, I don't know who it is, but his code name is Mr. Robert. Mr. Robert has all kinds of personal problems. Mr. Robert is very angry with you. And Mr. Robert is giving all of the information. And the senior officials at CIA said, oh, damn it, that's Edward Lee Howard. We know who that is. What they learned from that was we should have taken away his clearance. We should have put him in a non-sensitive position and eased him out rather than just saying, don't let the door hit you when you leave. There are ways to get rid of people, and they did it wrong. So,
I know. Yeah.
Because of his ego, he burned them badly, on a lot
That's interesting. Yeah. So, I know Aldrich Ames, as you mentioned, he had his ego issues. Obviously, Hansen, the FBI guy. It's really funny. You're going to laugh at this. I was undercover with the FBI. I was working an extraterritorial operation in Athens when I was in the they were using the Legat's office. I was there as DIA, but undercover with FBI. It's complicated. We were chasing the terrorist group 17 November this is back in 2000, early 2000, before 9/11. And I picked up one of the FBI internal magazines, the FBI has this, they had Hansen receiving his 30-year reward. It's oh, hey, look, there's your guy. He just got an award.
Yeah. Anna Montes got an award from George Tenet.
Anna from DIA. Oh, my God. Yeah. I have stories about her. People knew there was something up with her. One of the guys that worked with me for a while during in Task Force Stratus Ivy was telling me stories about how he was reporting to DAC, to the DIA CI guys, who were idiots, just saying, that, hey, there's something wrong with her, and they were ignoring him. So that was a failure
of workplace because I think it was during the Brothers to the Rescue incident, and they were all in this. I think they were in the tank in the Pentagon on some kind of an emergency meeting for days in responding to the Brothers to the Rescue shoot down. And Anna Montes said something that just wasn't right to others there. Right, you're not supposed to say something that is saying, good for the Cuban government. Those guys got what they deserve. The Cuban, it's which government are you working for? Whose side are you on here? It wasn't that she was seeing it from their perspective. She was actually siding with them. And I think that's where all this started. Some people started trying to report her and say, hey, something's just wrong about this. You need to look into it. But I think from the FBI side who looked into it, they said it's really hard to make a counterintelligence case. You need so much evidence. You need contact with case officers. You need forensic proof that you can show to a judge. A bad feeling isn't enough. Something she says isn't enough. And so I think to defend the FBI, their hands were tied, and it was just a hard situation.
Well, I'm a proponent of allowing the military to take a stronger role, even if it's with military civilians. As Army counterintelligence, we have a lot of the same authorities. I know because I've worked as a special agent in Army counterintelligence. We share FBI authorities in some areas. As a matter of fact, I've been on joint FBI Army operations back during the late 80s. We were running joint FBI Army teams to monitor the Soviets when they were coming to Marshall, Texas, to watch the elimination of the Pershing II missile boosters. So we worked very well because we share, we had military bases, and so we basically agreed to work together to share authorities to make sure it was seamless. So just saying, I think there's ways of doing things that sometimes I don't think we use all the resources available. Just saying. So, but yeah, Anna was a bad egg, and she got caught, but she did some damage. So I think it's interesting that things like that were so hard to detect. And by the way, for the record, DIA does not do a lot of polygraphs, which I'm not a big believer in the polygraph. Polygraphs don't always get you the right result. Speaking as someone who's used them and been on them, I always had no problem with the basic polygraph regarding, have you done criminal stuff? Have you destroyed ADP, or are you a foreign asset? I have no problem with any of that. That's something DIs to put us operatives through all the time. It's no big deal. It's always the lifestyle stuff to me. But to your point, I guess that one guy got caught on the lifestyle stuff. I mean, I don't know. It's one of those kind of half.
Plus the toxicology reports, right?
Well, yeah,
so,
I think that would add a factor. Yeah.
William Johnson, who's ex-CIA, who wrote a book back in the 80s, he goes back to the Second World War into the 80s, and he wrote also an excellent book on counterintelligence. Talks about the polygraph being at its best when it's a tool that supplements a bigger investigation. And I think the problem is too many people look at the polygraph as like the ultimate authority.
No, you can't.
The polygraph is an indicator, and it's a contributor to a bigger process. But it should be, it's a great tool.
So I'm going to disclose something that I can't get in a lot of detail, but when during the first part of the War on Terror, we were bringing in linguists like there's no tomorrow, because look, I don't speak Farsi, I don't speak Pashto, so and I'm not going to learn it in 3 months. It's never going to happen. So we were bringing in all sorts of translators. I mean, in Iraq and Afghanistan. And of course, Al Qaeda figured it out. It's like, oh yeah, we should be putting our people into the stream of people being hired to be linguists. So we figured out that they were doing it. We've never written a book on this, by the way. We figured out they were doing it, and because we had already cleared some people that were suspected, we had to clandestinely, and I'm not joking about this, and this is not even in Lockhart, my book on Afghanistan, we clandestinely flew in polygraphers to go after the guys we thought were working for Al Qaeda, and we did it. We did it. This is one of the most successful kind of undisclosed operations. I can disclose it now because, we're no longer in combat, but we did do that, and it worked very well.
That goes right to the heart of. It's a separate issue, but just to reinforce what you said, one of the biggest weaknesses of the U.S. intelligence community has always been foreign area expertise and foreign language fluency, especially these critical languages like Farsi and others.
Pashto.
Pashto.
Dari. So no, it's true. And I'm kind of surprised I made it through my entire career. My language is basically sort of Portuguese because I went to high school in Lisbon, and kind of Spanish because I made it to 200 level in college.
They would call it Portuñol. I'm sure they would say Portuñol, some combination of the two.
Yeah, so I had a hard time in college Spanish because I always wanted to revert back to Portuguese. But anyway, so hey, boy, Dr. Lockhart, this has been a great conversation. Thank you for being here. This has been really amazing. So thanks for, this was good. So I'd like to have you come back because I think we should talk more about this stuff because clearly there's more stories out there from both of us. We could tell about this, right? I mean, this is great stuff.
Anytime. I've got a lot of, I teach this, and I teach just over a period of 16 weeks. So I have a lot of cases that illustrate a lot of points, and I've got cases that will challenge M.I.C.E. and say, look, see, it doesn't work in this case, because what if it's somebody who's, for me, it doesn't really work super clearly for Hansen, because there's just something off with him. His relationship with the
no doubt,
definitely the ego, right? The ego for sure. Because when they arrested him, he said, "What took you so long?" That's classic ego. But there are other things going on with his motives that M.I.C.E. doesn't fully account for.
Well, see, I think we should come back and talk about that because I think there's other things I've noticed too within my operations where I've had to go way more exotic, where I've departed from even using those four things as a tool because. It's like once you get, it's like this is tradecraft 101, and no doubt it's important, but you get to the graduate level. Hansen's like a graduate level study. Would you agree with me on that? It's like Absolutely. This is kind of different. Yeah, I mean,
no, and I'm really pleased to hear you describing that you do it that way. That M.I.C.E. is tradecraft 101, but then when you go to the graduate level, you got to kind of set that aside and look at a bigger universe. And I think that's how it should be used. That M.I.C.E. is your beginning point. But there's so much more to the world than that.
Well, I've had to run literal off-the-books operations. So it's like, you're going to have to be very creative and figure things out in ways that you weren't trained to do. So we could talk about that some other time because I mentioned, I actually had to do an operation to get Boberg Dahl back. And that's a whole. We created one of the options for President Obama, where it was like, anyway, we'll stay there for another day. But it was like, okay, no rules, just go figure it out. And the motivations I had to gain access to assets, none of this worked. None of this was going to be relevant because there was diplomacy, there was egos, there's general officers. Just saying, that's a whole different range of challenges. Yeah. So it's a like you said, it's a graduate level study that we should discuss. By the way, Dr. Moran has me come over because I've done lectures kind of on the graduate level stuff to his students, which is always fun. So I appreciate you being here. I appreciate what you do because I think this is an underappreciated area of intelligence. Like you said, I agree with you. I think this goes back beyond. I think this is probably the oldest profession. Just saying. So right after we mastered language,
we got to give credit to Vernon Walters for coming up with that.
That's great.
Yeah.
So anyway, Dr. James Lockhart of the University of Texas El Paso, thank you for being here, part of the Sentinel Circle. And I really sincerely appreciate this. I'd like to have some more additional conversations about this because we just scratched the surface of this whole issue. So thanks.
My pleasure, sir.
Thank you. And we'll be back next week with another great episode of discussion, another live interview with live people, better than dead people, right? That's always a plus. So look for us next week to be talking about with Dr. Moran, the aforementioned Dr. Moran, on tradecraft relating to movies and things like that. So we'll be back then. Thanks for being here.